Welcome to the Wisdom of Show. I'm your host, Simon Bowen, and every week I'm speaking to the world's greatest leaders, thinkers, and entrepreneurs about complex issues and impactful leadership. Join us in the Renaissance of Wisdom. Well, welcome to the Wisdom of, and my guest today is another Aussie, another Australian, Garry Ridge. And Garry is the longest serving CEO of WD-40. I need to find out in a few minutes from him how an Australian ends up being the longest serving CEO of an American company that has become a true global brand. And having spent time in the automotive industry and being a bit of a handyman kind of person, you know, WD-40 is that go-to. Everyone has it in their shed or garage or whatever because it does pretty amazing things. But he's so much more than that. Garry really is a leader that focuses on the importance and power of people and the fundamental importance of value as a competitive advantage in the business. He's a multiple times published author. The latest book has only just been released a week ago as we record this podcast, right over his shoulder. Any dumbass can do it. Just the title itself suggests that that we should be reading that book to find out more about what he has to talk about. He's the founder of the Learning Moments, and so it's really this idea of understanding all of these learning moments that go on in organizations. You're a emeritus professor. You're across all sorts of things. You're doing consultancy work, but all stemming out of this rich history you have, Garry, as a corporate leader globally, right, and leading people. Thank you so much for giving us this time. We live in a pretty interesting world right now, and we need leaders, right, to step up. And you bring some real perspective to that. So thanks for being so generous in giving this time to chat through this.
Yeah, g'day, Simon. It's a pleasure to be with another Aussie, and I thank you for the opportunity. And certainly we do need, I often say, our job as leaders is to send people home happy, because happy people build happy families, families build happy communities build a happy world. And we could do with a little bit of happier world right now.
We could. And, I think, I do think that business is one of the most powerful forces for good on the planet, but only in the hands of the right leaders, right? It can also be a very destructive force, but it can cross international borders, unlike most governments. It is self-sustaining because it generates revenue. So unlike kind of charities and not-for-profits, and it's a powerful tool, but it needs great leadership. We'll talk about leadership in a minute. I just have to ask, because we're both Australian, how does an Australian end up leading WD-40 and being the longest-serving CEO of an American company that really has become this powerful global brand that almost it's an interesting concept. The number of people worldwide that have picked up a can of WD-40, right? It's probably mind-boggling. I don't know how we would ever measure that. I was going to say almost everybody's probably held a can, but almost everyone's probably seen a can. How does an Australian end up doing that?
Well, I learned something a long time ago. Get in the game, play your best game every game, and there's a chance you might get picked on the AT team, Simon. And I'm very fortunate. I was born in Sydney and grew up there. And before I joined WD-40 Company, I actually worked for the licensee of the brand in Australia, a company called Hawker Pacific. They were in the aviation business. And one day I got a phone call from the president of WD-40 in the US, who I'd met many, many times. And he said, we're thinking about really turning up the volume on global expansion. At that time, the brand was, it was very well known in the US. And I'm talking now, 1985, 86. But it had sprinkles of business around the world. And they decided that it should be a global brand. And they said, well, we want to open a subsidiary in Australia to start building the brand in Asia Pacific. Would you be interested in joining us to do that? I went, whoa. My dad worked for the same company for 50 years. He was a fitter and turner and ended up being an engineer. And I said to Dad, what do you think about me working for WD-40? He said, you can't go wrong with that stuff, son. So my first piece of advice is take advice of your dad. So I joined them in 1987 with a fax machine under my bed and spent 6 months standing up the company. And then I worked from 87 through to 94 out of Sydney, but a lot of time up in Asia. I spent a lot of time, taking that blue and yellow can with a little red top to many places in Asia. And I was having a conversation in 1994 with the then president of the company. And I said, is there anything else you'd like me to do? I got a bit of time on my hands. I could do a bit more work if you like. He said, funny you should ask. You want to move to the US? I said, to do what? He said, come over here and help me take the brand globally. You seem to have that passion. I need help. I said, well, why not? So
Yeah.
packed up our toys and we moved to San Diego. So I think the answer to your question is if you're prepared to disrupt yourself and if you're prepared to, be courageous and curious, you can end up. A couple of years later, he retired. And then for some reason, the board of directors of a US public company thought that this, Aussie bloke might be okay as the CEO. And as you said, I then ended up being the longest serving Australian of a CEO of a US public company for 25 years, which was quite
Wow.
an experience and quite a wonderful gift that I was given.
Fantastic. And there's a bit of Australian um, cultural norm in that, which is have a go, you
Give
know?
it a go, mate. Give it a go.
Yeah. And which really means always be prepared, right? So
Hmm.
be at your best as often as you can, or for, or as frequently as you can, so that you can have a go, give it a go, right? And WD-40, for years I didn't know what the name meant. And yet, WD-40 is used for lots of things that perhaps it was never intended for. I grew up in farming, farming Western Australia. And, when you start a tractor and you need to preheat for the diesel injectors, it was not uncommon to spray a bit of WD-40 into the air filter just to get the thing started,
Yeah.
which I'm
Yeah.
sure it was never designed for. But WD-40, just give people the snapshot on the name, because I'm sure a lot of people
Yeah.
might not be aware of the origins of the name.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it aligns with what I call the learning moment. Back in 1953 in San Diego, the company was called Rocket Chemical Company. Very small company,
Hmm.
maybe no more than 5 employees. And there was a problem with condensation and corrosion in the umbilical cord of the Atlas space rocket. So the chemists got together and started to formulate solutions. And solution one didn't work, and 22 didn't work, and 38 didn't work, and 39 didn't work. And guess what?
Number
40
four.
worked.
Okay.
So it was named WD, water displacement 40th formula.
Right.
Now, there's really something in that as well. Never give up. I'm glad they didn't stop at 39, because if they did, I wouldn't be talking to you today.
Yes.
And I'm glad 39 didn't work, Simon, because I don't think WD-39 sounds anything as good as WD-40.
But it also, I spend my time in mostly in the marketing and sales world, but also in delivery. I've developed a system that can capture the entire genius of a company in a single visual model, right? Which means if you build ships for the Navy, you can explain it in about 7 minutes. And
Mm,
in that work, we end up in lots of conversations with lots of company about what is the uncommon wisdom and genius they bring to the marketplace. But everyone's chasing brandable names, pithy marketing statements, and everything else. And no marketing firm ever would have told them to go to the market with the name WD-40, because what does it even mean? But it is a brand all of its own now. It has a unique niche that can never be taken from it because of what it is. And so sometimes your genius is actually your best branding, you know?
yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we guarded, and now the trade dress of WD-40 is one of the most recognized trade dresses in the world,
Mm,
one of the most protected. And during my time at the company, I don't know how many conversations and presentations I had from ad agencies who were saying, "Well, you should update the can, change the colors,
yeah,
do this and do that." I said, "Hey, I've spent and invested millions of dollars making people aware of the blue and yellow can with a little red top. You
yes.
want me to change it and spend millions more telling them that it's changed? We're not going to do that." So the wonderful thing about it is, Simon, wherever you go in the world, the blue and yellow can with the little red top looks exactly the same,
Yeah.
except for the words under the shield and the words on the back, which are then in the local languages.
Yeah.
So truly, it's like Coke, the Coke bottle, or like
Yeah.
Apple. The brand is just totally consistent, and that was one of our absolute decisions.
Well, it would imagine somebody saying to IKEA, drop the blue and gold,
Yeah,
and you just wouldn't do it. And it does give rise to a lot of people make decisions based on style preferences rather than what actually makes sense. And so when someone says, oh, you should change the can now, really what they're indicating is we don't like the look of it.
right.
And therefore, you should change it because we don't like the look of it. The market probably doesn't, which of course is not true, because what the market's interested in is what is in the can. And you
Yeah,
go to a hardware store anywhere, you can immediately see the WD-40 can, right? And so
correct.
you have to stick to what is true to you. And that leads us, Garry, into, I think, what is the most important conversations for us to be having, and that is about leadership. And so much of what you focus on as you walk through, these learning moments with people and the importance of people in organizations. And let's start with a learning culture. I know that's been a big feature of, you're a student of Ken Blanchard, and all of your. I looked through the books you like to read. We grew up on the same kinds of literature, if you like, and so I'd love to. You emphasize creating a culture where mistakes are actually viewed as learning moments. These learning moments, and they are. I'd love you to expand a bit more on that because we perhaps live in a world where mistakes are not as, particularly with social media. Make one mistake and you're crucified. Where's the learning in that? I'd love to expand on this idea of the learning moments
Sure.
and building this
Yeah,
culture.
yeah, absolutely. So when we think about it, fear is one of the most disabling emotions we could have. Think about driving down a road, and in Australia, you're driving down a freeway, and in the middle of the road, there's, Red the kangaroo
Yeah,
standing there looking at you, right? And you're saying, Red, get out of the way. And he's not getting out of the way because he's paralyzed by the headlights.
yeah,
So fear can actually kill you. So why do we call failure failure?
yeah,
I don't see people running down the corridors of businesses yelling to the top of their voice, I'm a failure, I'm a failure, I'm a failure. But in reality, every success is the outcome of something that's been tried before. And WD-40 is a typical example of that. So what I said early on is, look, let's read words in organizations are so paralyzing. So I
yeah,
said, let's take the word failure out of our vocabulary. What we're going to do is we're going to call whatever we do a learning moment. And the definition of a learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. So if you've got a positive learning moment in your organization, share it.
yeah,
If you've had a discovery of a negative learning moment, share it. And you will be rewarded and applauded equally for the positive and the negative. Now, interestingly enough, to do that, you have to create psychological safety within the organization. And unfortunately, so many leaders create these toxic environments where people don't feel safe.
mm,
So the learning moment became truly a foundation of us being able to do what we needed to do, which was always trying, always learning, always wanting to learn. I'll give you a really interesting story, if you like, how this
sure,
works. Many years ago, when I was still based in Australia, or was I based in Australia? No, I wasn't. I was based in the US. Um, I went to a trade show, an automotive trade show in Beijing, and I was giving away WD-40 samples to automotive tradesmen. And the Chinese word for sample is yang ping, and the Chinese word for lubricant is lunhua. So here I am in the corridors giving away yang ping lunhua, yang ping lunhua. And the Chinese people, tradesmen, were walking past me, ignoring me. And I talked to my Chinese, colleagues. I said, "Is it me? Is my Chinese that bad?" And no, no, no. I said, well, why don't they want my lubricant? They're automotive people. They need it. I look out the corner of my eye and I see a Toyota motor stand over in the corner, and there's people lined up as far as I can see to pick up what looked like to me a brown paper bag with a string handle on it. So I said, I got to know what's in that bag. So I walk over, I look in the bag, Simon, there's nothing in the bag. Okay, what's my learning moment here? Why do they want that bag and not want my WD-40? Well, the learning moment was that bag was useful to them. That little brown paper bag was just the right size that they would use to take to their corner store, as you'd call it, to get a scoop of rice. So
Right.
I go back to the colleagues and I ask them, let's find out what they need. So we do some intercepts and we find out they don't need oil. They have dirty diesel oil that's in abundance for lubrication. But what is a big problem to them is rust. So we changed our delivery to anti-rust oil. Within minutes, I had to have security guards on the stand to stop the Chinese tradesmen from pushing us over to get the samples. I
Right.
could have walked away from there saying there is no future for our product in China because they don't want our sample. But the learning moment was curiosity, asking the question. So, I mean, there's an example of how the learning
Interesting.
moment is powerful.
Well, in everything that we do, as we navigate life, every experience is a win, a loss, or a lesson. And the loss and the lesson are interchangeable.
Hmm.
It's perspective, right? It depends on how you view what was not a win.
Right.
Maybe we'd be better off using language like that was a win, or it was not a win. And if
Yes.
it was not a win, what's the lesson?
Right.
It's only a loss if you leave it as a loss, leave it unaddressed, don't get the lesson out of it. Wins, losses, and lessons, right? And
Love it.
we don't teach that to children as they go through school. In fact, children go through schooling winning and losing.
Right.
You did it well or you didn't, and then early careers often end up like that. And it's as you talk about this, and I also know that you've looked at some of Brene Brown's work as well. Just talk me through a little bit. Just getting the WD-40 management team, particularly senior leadership, to lean into the level of vulnerability that you actually probably need to have as a leader to make that shift from, they're not mistakes, they're learning moments, and we're all going to make them. And more importantly, we should share them no matter where we sit in the organization. There's a fair amount of vulnerability and courage required at a leadership level. Were there any practical things that you did as the primary leader to get people to buy into that, particularly other leaders who might have had ego that prevented them from doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first introduced the concept, people were, I would say, scared.
Yeah.
They went, oh, wait a moment. I'm not sure that I trust the fact that if I share something negative, I'm not going to be punished. So actually, what we did is in the first months, I ran a program in the company. I said, I want you to share with me your learning moments on a monthly basis. And we're going to have a monthly prize for doing
Yeah.
that. And at the end of the year, we're going to have a big prize. I'll send whoever the winner is and their husband, wife, or significant other on a first class trip around the world. In the first month, Simon, I got probably 4 entries. So what did I do with those 4 people? I made heroes out of them.
Mm.
I had them on the center stage with the spotlight. I was rewarding them and applauding them for sharing. And the next month I got 12 and I rewarded and applauded them. And the next month I got more. So by the end of the year, I was getting hundreds of these things because people saw they were safe.
Yeah.
So I think again, it goes back to, you can put any words you like out there, but leadership is the shadow of the leader. And if you're not, you know, acting the words, then you will not build trust and you will not get people on board. And
Yeah.
that's why I also say the other thing that is so important in organizations are values. We had a hierarchical set of values. And I often say, imagine a place where you go to work every day, you make a contribution to something bigger than yourself. You learn something new, you're protected and set free by a compelling set of values, and you go home happy. So if you have a set of values in the organization that empowers people at every level in the organization to make a decision, they are going to feel, number one, like they matter,
Yep.
and they have the ability to make choices.
Yeah.
And instead of quacking up the hierarchy, looking for the highest, person in the command chain to ask permission to make a decision. So you have to empower the people through a hierarchical set of values in the organization.
So just lean in a little further. You said it twice now. Hierarchical values. Just lean in a little further on that. That's not a common. People don't commonly say hierarchical values. You must have a set of values for your organization, right? Lean a little further in on the hierarchical piece, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I sure will. So the number one value we had is we value doing the right thing. The number two value was we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. Those were the two most powerful values. The number six value was we value sustaining the WD-40 economy, which was we value being a profitable business.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if the values were not hierarchical, someone may pick the opportunity to be more profitable against doing the right thing.
Okay.
Here's an example, right? You're working in the supply chain. Someone comes to you one day and says, Simon, I'm going to make a hero out of you. You're going to be promoted after this meeting. I guarantee it. Tell me more. I've looked at your product. There's an ingredient you use in your product. I've tested the one that you use. We have an ingredient that's equal to or better than the one you use. And not only that, I've done the calculation. You can save $4 million a year straight to the bottom line. Shareholders are going to love you if you move and take our product. Oh, really? You aren't you excited, Simon, to get up to the CEO's office and get your hero badge today? And the guy says, but there's just one thing I've got to mention to you. You just got to put a little warning on the can. And don't worry about the warning because everybody else does it. It's not illegal. And in the warning I would be talking about, if people don't know, in California, there's a thing called Proposition 65. So if there's an ingredient in your product that's known by the state of California to cause cancer, you have to actually put that label on the can. A lot of people do it. You go to a Starbucks, it has it on the front door. And this person says, well, thank you so much, but I'm not going to take you up on your offer. Excuse me? It's $4 million. Yeah, I know. However, we make decisions at this company by a hierarchical set of values. And our first value is we value doing the right thing.
Right.
And we have a mandate that says we'll have no cancer-causing chemicals in anything we sell. And our second value is we value creating positive, lasting memories. And cancer does not create positive, lasting memories. So I'm sorry, I'm going to, have to not take you up on your offer. Well, maybe we should go see your CEO. And I'm sure he's talking to Wall Street every day. He wants that 4 million. You don't understand, Simon. You can go and talk to the CEO, the chairman of the board, anyone in the organization, and you will get exactly the same answer, because even though we have a value that says we're going to protect the economy and be profitable, our values being hierarchical help us make decisions in the order that is important to us. Now, how does Simon feel? He's working in supply. He's empowered. He just made a $4 million decision. He goes up to the CEO's office and said, I just didn't save us $4 million because I lived our values. And the CEO goes, you're my hero.
And what other options does the CEO have, by the way? If they're the values and we've agreed them and we're trying to live with them, It's interesting. I'm sure you have, or you did see at the time, it was kind of 80s, Jan Carlson's Moments of Truth work out of, I can't remember which airline it was now, but, there's 50,000 moments of truth in a company every day by which you're being judged. And, those judgments almost always values judgments in those moments of truth, where you either met the challenge or you didn't meet the challenge, right? And then if they were connected together with these learning moments, if companies were acutely aware of the moments of truth where values get tested every single day, and they recognize the learning moments that come from these tests every day, that would create quite something in terms of a culture. So it raises two things in my head. One is the concept of servant leadership, because that story you told places the CEO in this role of steward or servant for the employee who's making decisions against the values. So I'd love to, have you kind of give us a bit more of an unpacking of servant leadership, and then just the idea of building and sustaining that company culture, because for that to work, for the hierarchical values to work, it has to be everywhere and without question, right? I have to be able to ignore that $4 million deal. I've got to be confident that under push and shove and test, that's going to stack up. So I'd love to get your insights into servant leadership and sustaining that company-wide kind of culture, strategies, tactics, observations that you might have.
Yeah, certainly. So, you know, I used to say to my leadership team, be under no misunderstanding. The only reason you're here, the only reason we are together here today is to help those we have the privilege to lead step into the better version of themselves. Because there are two things that are most important to people in business or in life. Do I feel like and am I treated like I belong? And do I feel like and am I treated like I matter? That's why we took the word manager out of our vocabulary. We didn't have managers at the company. You manage your bank account, you manage inventory, you do not manage people. Hi, Simon, I'm here to manage you. Doesn't sound good. So we changed the name of our leadership hierarchy to coach. So you reported to your coach, and the responsibility of the coach was very much aligned to servant leadership. If you think of a great footy coach, number one is they know how to win the game. Number two is they never ever run onto the field and steal the ball and kick the goal. Now toxic leaders are micromanagers. In fact, I just want to introduce you to someone. Hang on a moment. I'll be back.
Oh.
This is Alec. This is Alec, the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Inc. And one of Alec's bad behaviors is he is a micromanager. He has to have his nose in everything. And I created Alec to be able to talk about the toxic behaviors of toxic leaders. So number one, a great coach never runs on the field to take the ball. A great coach never goes to the podium to pick up the prize. He may be next to the podium and get a bucket of ice thrown on him, but he allows the person who played the game to get up there and take the glory.
Yeah.
A great coach spends a lot of time in the stinky locker room, not as corporate royalty, but in the stinky locker room with the players, understanding what's getting in their way and not helping them win. You know, the book that I wrote with Ken Blanchard, the 1 Minute Manager, we wrote a book together called Helping People Win at Work. The byline was, I'm not here to mark your paper, I'm here to help you get an A. So servant leadership is truly about our responsibility and the honor we have to be able to lead people into a better part of what they do. And that's why my new book is called Any Dumbass Can Do It, because dumbassery is your superpower. You're there to not be the expert, not have all the answers, even the wrong ones. You're there to help people bring out the best of themselves. So that's what servant leadership's all about.
Yeah.
And
go on. Sorry.
it's simple. It's not easy. I'll tell you that. It's not easy. It's simple, but not easy. And time is not your friend.
Yeah.
You have to do this consistently. Culture equals values plus behavior times consistency.
Yeah.
And you have to do it every day.
And, you know, trust is built through consistency and congruence. And I'm often, you know, we share a lot of similar ideals around organizations and people, but, you know, we manage things and we lead people. We manage the tangible, but we lead the intangible. And business is lost in the intangible. All the value lives in the ambiguity. And the work and the job of leaders and coaches is to resolve ambiguity for people, not to claim the win or take the last pass and kick the goal, as you said. You do have to feel pretty comfortable and confident in yourself and be willing to do that. It's interesting if you think about the Learning Moments initiative, because this is actually a whole series of learning moments for the leaders themselves. And you know, you talk about how it started and how's it going, you know, these phases of it. Are there some principles that you would share with people around this whole idea of learning moments? So We don't have managers, we have coaches. It's not about catching people out. It's about helping them get an A. It's helping them learn from the things that are not wins for them, so that they can actually take the lessons and spending time. It's interesting. We live in such a fast-paced world. Pause has been eliminated,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
slowing down is actually the key to some of this.
Absolutely.
So, are there any principles that you would share with leaders of companies? Let's imagine right now we're talking to a founder or a CEO of a company, specifically to that person, and you're going to share some key principles with them. So, practical things to keep their eye on to really be able to build this kind of culture, create the learning moments as a movement inside their organization, have leaders positioned as coaches, not managers, and have people feel like they belong and feel like they're valued and they're worthwhile. What are some of those principles that you would share with them?
Number one is you have to understand it's not about you. Your ego cannot eat your empathy. Your empathy must eat your ego.
Mm.
You are there to bring out the best in others. And if you do, you'll build a enduring organization that will grow over time, number one. Number two, you have to have a clearly defined, authentic purpose. Why do we exist? And the purpose has to be something that people are making a contribution to something bigger than themselves. Number three, you have to have a compelling set of hierarchical values. It's so important. You have to be dedicated to the fact that you are not going to protect your own comfort zone at the expense of other people's development.
Mm.
And so many people protect their own comfort zone. This leadership thing is a balance between being tough-minded and tender-hearted, and the genius is in the middle in the end. So, it's not about you. It's about the people you have the privilege to lead, but you have to have that framework around it.
Mm-hmm.
When I was going to school back in Australia, I went to Drummoyne Boys High School, just,
Mm-hmm.
a suburb of Sydney. My science teacher gave me a petri dish, and the science teacher said, "We're going to grow culture in this petri dish." So what's important? Number one, what ingredients do you need to put in the petri dish to grow great culture? And number two, are you, as the owner of the petri dish, brave enough to not only treat the toxins, but also are you going to feed the good ingredients, reward and applaud? So, this is a balance. I mean, great cultures are not about margarita parties, popcorn pizzas, and a pool table. No, you know, a friend of mine owns a set of a chain of furniture stores over in Charlotte, North Carolina. His name's Charlie Maloof, and he says culture is not a microwavable event. It takes a crock pot approach. Do you know the ingredients? And you have to cook it every day. And that's what we did at WD-40 Company. And that's why we had a 93% employee engagement. 98% of the people globally said they'd love to work at the company. Oh, and by the way, Simon, we had a compounded annual growth rate of total shareholder return of 15% a year. We grew the value of the company from 300 million US dollars to 3.6 billion dollars over that period of time, and we just sold oil in a can.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd love to lean in a little bit on the comfort zone comment that you made, that principle. Can you unpack that a bit further for me?
Yeah, having those redirection conversations are usually difficult for the person who is guiding that redirection conversation because, and the reason they're normally difficult is we haven't taken the time to really share with the person we have the privilege to lead what we expect from each other. And we tend to approach them more as a redirection conversation instead of a development conversation.
Mm.
So I might say to you, Simon, you and I agreed that this was the outcome we were going to get. And I committed to you that I was going to help you get there.
Yeah.
And we're not getting there. Now, I could go down one road. I can say, you're a lazy SOB, you're not doing your work. Or I could say, Simon, are you okay? Is there something getting in your way?
Yeah.
What don't I know? And how can I help? So you've got if you frame it correctly, that comfort zone problem doesn't exist. But if you don't frame it directly, I'm sure the leaders who are watching us now can think about that conversation they went in to have with someone, and they were feeling very uncomfortable about having it, probably more uncomfortable than the person who was going to be delivered that conversation
Yes.
to.
Yeah.
So, and we tend to protect our comfort zone and we don't do anything about it. One time I was in a meeting at WD-40 Company, and there was a person in the meeting who'd come to the meeting in the morning, and one of our values was or is creating positive, lasting memories. And this person was not creating a positive, lasting memory. They were having one of those mornings, and you and others have been in these meetings where people were just sucking the oxygen out of the room, right? So what do you do as the leader? Well, number one, you can decide to do nothing. That doesn't work. Number two, you could reprimand the person in the room. That's not a good thing to do because everybody else in the room thinks, when am I going to be publicly assassinated?
Yeah.
Well, number three, you can have an intervention. So when the meeting was over, I said to this person, let's go for a walk. So we walked out of the building and I looked under a tree and behind a car and in a trash can. And they said, what the hell are you looking for? I said, I'm looking for you, Simon. The you I know and love was not in that room today. What's on your mind? What's getting in your way? I know that you value creating positive, lasting memories because I see you doing it every day. And we had a wonderful conversation. There was some stuff going on in Simon's life that that were really putting him in a bad place. So again, that went from having, an uncomfortable conversation to one because I really cared about what was in getting in Simon's way.
Yeah. It's interesting, Garry. I've interviewed major generals that have led the Australian forces into Afghanistan and places like that, and former Navy SEAL officers, and I've done a lot of work with Department of Defence and military here in Australia. And military leaders, despite what people might think they know about them, first and foremost care about people.
Mm-hmm.
And every one of them that I've ever met and spoken to speaks in ways that you speak. Yet I don't feel like that's the common language of the commercial world. I think there's I really don't sit well with the phrase, well, it's just business, because it's never just business. It's always about people. And so we do face some challenges of leadership today. We always do, but I think we're in a particularly uncertain period of time, politically, militarily, economically, geopolitically, socially, in so many ways. I mean, if we just think about social media, impact that's having on the world. So we have challenging times, and we have challenges with leadership as well. Do we have enough people truly stepping into leadership as opposed to management? I'd love to explore um, some of your experiences that were more challenging as you tried to lead in this way, and the lessons and the learning moments that you got out of those. And I'd be really happy to have your take on what you're seeing happening right now. What are the challenges that we really need to be thinking about for leaders in the world that we're living in right now?
Yeah, well, I think the challenge is we haven't done a good job of defining what good leadership looks like.
Mm,
And a lot of people think that command and control, top-down leadership, I learned a long time ago, you can't make anybody do anything and sustain it. They need to want to do it. And it gets back to, if you want to win the hearts and minds of people, they have to know that you care about them, that they matter, and that they feel like they belong. That's why I had the concept of tribes.
mm,
We are really tribal in nature, and unfortunately, we're going through there's a pandemic right now around the world in business, and it's a loneliness pandemic.
mm,
COVID didn't help it, where we isolated people and sent them into solitary confinement. We've lost the art of being able to communicate, which is really sad. So yeah, I think that, and again, this whole thing around moving from short-term thinking, um, you know, Wall Street really, when you're a public company CEO, you have to really decide whether you're going to play the short-term game or the long-term game. And when I was CEO at WD-40 Company, I never gave out quarterly guidance. I said, this is what I think we can do annually. Here's where we're going. I remember at one investor meeting, one of the analysts said, you missed your number this quarter. I said, no, I didn't miss my number. I missed your number. It wasn't my number.
Mm.
So I think you've got to decide which way you want to go. But I think the bottom line is we can do a better job. And, Aristotle was born in 384 BC. He said, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. We are really slow learners, aren't we? If we don't really understand that our job as leaders is to create a place where people not only enjoy what they're doing, but they grow. And it's hard work. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's hard work.
It's interesting. I've been to a lot of mine sites. I've done a lot of work with mining companies, and so I've been on a gold mine on an island off the northeast coast of Papua New Guinea that's inside an old volcano with, thermal steam still coming up from below ground. I've been in open pit mines in Central Australia and iron ore mines and everything else. And I remember talking to the mine manager of a gold mine, and because we were doing culture work and leadership work, and I said, what are the metrics? And he said, well, our measure is X ounces of gold per month, right? And I said, okay, so, how do you get the team to hit that number? He said, well, I can guarantee we won't hit that number. He said, well, we'll be below it or we'll be above it, but we won't actually hit it. And that number doesn't mean anything to anybody on the mine. The metrics that matter to people is there hot and cold running water at the accommodation village? And what is the food like at the mess when everyone gets there after a 12-hour shift? And am I sitting in the mess with them? And do I move around and sit at different tables, or do I just sit with my management team mates? And the number they're most interested in, he said, it's not even the safety number. The number they're most interested in is how did their team perform against the other teams that do the same thing as them but on a different shift rotation. And he said, and I can measure that by the leader of the team, not by the people in the. It was a really interesting conversation. Absolutely. And he was saying the only people that care about X ounces per month are my bosses. And honestly, if I hit over the top of that, I never hear from them.
Right.
But if I hit under that, they want to come to the mine to see what's going on. And he said it's we focus on the wrong things, which is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Personal development has obviously been a key feature for you. You have a great reading list on your websites. It's thelearningmoments.net. thelearningmoment.net. And you've got a pretty good reading list there. And I've read many of those books, and they are really pieces of art in so many respects. So personal development has obviously been very important to you. I suspect, just listening to you, your coaching is growing everybody else to be the best version of themselves. What habits or practices, obviously you're a reader, but what habits or practices have been really instrumental in your own development as a leader?
I'm reaching to get my piece of gold here. This is my little notebook. Yeah. Now, Simon, we're just these basic human beings wandering down this pathway of life.
Mm.
And in the bushes are these thieves that run out and grab us. And the thieves are greed and envy and jealousy and short-term thinking and whatever. And we can get caught in those bushes, and for a moment we feel okay. But as long as we stay in those bushes, we're not progressing along this journey to where our destiny is. So I'm a big fan of reminders. So on this little notebook that I have here, I have this little note written to myself, and I have it on my computer and it's on my phone. And I've had this in front of me for many, many years. And it says, am I being the person I want to be right now? And then I say, who is that person? And I say, I want to be grateful, caring, empathetic, reasonable. I want to be a listener. I want to be fact-based. I want to have a balanced opinion. I want to be curious. I want to be a learner. And I want to throw sunshine, not a shadow. Now, the reason I have this on my book and everywhere is because I am not very good at remembering what I really want to be, because the world tries to make me be something else that I don't want to be. And I don't want to spend too long in those bushes. So my advice is, who do you want to be? And why it's also important, I don't want you to take your leftovers to the next interaction you have. So many times we'll be in a meeting or we'll interact with someone and we've got something coming up pretty soon afterwards. We need to recenter ourselves, not to take our leftovers to the next person. We need to take the full plate of ourselves to the next person. We owe it to them. So I'm absolutely unapologetic about saying I have to continue reminding myself of that person that I feel I should be when I'm at my best. And in the coaching that I do now, I use the work of Marshall Goldsmith, who's a dear friend of mine, and his book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. I used it for 16 years when I taught at the University of San Diego. And there are 20 bad habits in there that we all have at some level of abundance. So the first thing as of a leader is be aware of what toxic leadership behaviors you have, and then be intentional about changing them. So in my coaching work, I coach 7 CEOs right now. I have them ask themselves every day, did I do my best to, and then what? Be a better listener, not micromanage. So over time, they change their behavior, but it's awareness, intention, consistency, results. It's kind of simple as that.
Well, I grew up in farming communities, and my father and his 9 siblings and every other farmer around used to say it's pretty straightforward, Simon.
Yeah, yeah.
And most things were, you have to put the crop in and wait for it to actually get a harvest. You can't do it at the last minute, and you've got to be consistent, and you've got to do the stuff every day that needs to be done. It is um, this idea of who you're really going to be. Before I run into some quick response questions with you, so we can know you a little bit better at a personal level, AI has grabbed the world by the throat, right? And I'm in a lot of conversations about AI, and just the notion of artificial versus real. Artificial intelligence versus real intelligence. Should it be called artificial intelligence, or should it be called synthetic intelligence? You know, um, and I can see identities disappearing into AI. I can see, because I see it happening every day. A leader of a business turns to chat to craft the presentation he wants to make or she wants to make to her staff. Is that their presentation, or is that chat's presentation? What we want to say to the world about a company and the value it brings. And I have this analogy that you live in a street, and there's a child in the street who's learning the flute, but they're fantastic. It's beautiful, and every afternoon you hear it as they practice. And then one Christmas, every kid in the street gets an instrument, and they all start playing. And there's drums and trumpets and trombones and guitars all playing at the same time. All of a sudden, you can't hear the flute, right? And so the instruments are all pretty sound and solid, but there's a lot of average use of those instruments or poor use of those instruments. And what was great has been lost. You can't hear it anymore unless you actually go and walk past the house. That's what I feel like is happening with AI in many respects at the moment. The tool is fine, but I fear we're losing identity. And I wonder if, in your conversations with the CEOs you work with and others, let's not talk about AI in terms of robotics and efficiency and marketing and everything. Just in the context of leadership, what are your observations and thoughts about AI and leadership, and how we should be thinking about this?
Well, I think it's like any new thing we've had over time. I remember when the fax machine came out, and my dad was an engineer and pretty bright guy, and he said, Gary, how do you get paper to go through wires? Why I'm saying that is I think the jury's out. Now, one of the things I do like about AI, and I think the opportunity is there, is one of the most frequent pieces of feedback I got when I was a full-time CEO is I don't have enough time. So if we can use a platform to do mundane work for us that gives us more time to be smart, to be entrepreneurial, to be strategic. I think that's an amazing benefit. I think anybody who wants to use it to replace themselves, I think that's not the, you cannot replace your authentic self. You still have to have the soul of who you are. So I think, look at how quickly it just boomed up in the last 2 years. And I think that the jury's out. We're going to find out what it really is. There's some positives to it, and there are obviously some negatives to it. But I think we need to, let it play. But we have to be, conscious of what we do. I use AI. I use it in my coaching practice where I can take a whole lot of data, dump it in, and it'll give me back a summary, which would have normally taken me a lot of time to do myself. Now I can spend that time on really understanding what I need to do around how it's shared, but I don't have to believe it. So I don't think it's a replacement; it's an enhancement.
Well, it's a tool. A scalpel
Yeah,
can heal or it can harm, depends who's holding it.
absolutely.
And I think the challenge for leadership are actually the decisions we make around it. What has been proven in human history is you can't stop technology,
No.
because we're an inventive species. But is it the greatest existential crisis facing mankind, or is it the greatest invention we've ever made? That will actually come down to the quality of leadership we apply to it, not to the tool itself. And so, there's real conversations there to be had. As we wrap it up, Garry, I'd love to just ask you some quick questions and get your responses to them. It gives people a bit more insight, if you like. You're a student of the world. You're obviously a student of history. You mentioned Aristotle, so you obviously like to read backwards as well. If you could go back to any big conversation in history and just sit in the room and hear it playing out, what would you want to be? What would you want to have heard firsthand, and why?
I really do like Winston Churchill. And I would love to really understand and hear, what was behind some of the positions he took. He was a person that was a raconteur. He could cut people down in a slice. But I think, the wisdom of people like Winston Churchill, and to look at what he did in times of unbelievable adversity, I think
Mm,
and bringing people along was really interesting.
mm.
And what I'd really love to do, I'd love to go back and have another chat with Dad. My mum lived till she was 99 years and 9 months old. My dad passed at 87, but I really would love to go and sit on a park bench with Dad again for a little while.
That's really interesting. I was thinking about this just over the last few days. 10 years ago, it's over 10 years now since my father passed away. I didn't I didn't have the questions and things I wanted to talk about with him then that I do today.
Absolutely.
And there's a wisdom that just comes. He was 80. There's a wisdom that just comes with age that we
Yeah.
overlook too often. Is there a period in history that you would love to have been able to experience firsthand?
Yeah, now. Now.
That's interesting. You're not
Yeah,
the first person that said that to me.
yeah, it's I think we learn from history and we can look back at it but I live in the now.
Yeah,
There's nothing I can do about yesterday and not much I can do about tomorrow yet, but I can, I often say life is a gift. Don't send it back unwrapped.
yeah, yeah. Fantastic. So, is there a moment of joy in life that just stands out for you? Um, like it was one of your pinnacle moments of joy, and it could be professional or personal, but and I'd be interested in why that particular moment.
I think it's seeing, just recently, my new little grandson. I think being a grandparent, my youngest grandson now is just 4 or 5 months old, and my granddaughter, and then I got two other grandkids. But I think that's a special time in life. I mean, And on my phone will pop up a little picture of Chloe, my granddaughter, and it's like that she is so curious and so energetic, and the world hasn't yet got to her.
Yeah.
And I think that gives me a lot of joy.
So what do you see? You, I guess what you're seeing is pure um, human life force when you're looking at a newborn, a baby, a toddler, as you say, before the world's gotten to them, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly. I
fascinating.
mean, yeah, they're just my little granddaughter was in a Bunnings store the other day because they live in Sydney,
Mm.
and my daughter sent me a picture of her looking at this huge color wall of paint colors, and the look on her face of joy at this huge wall of color was just, to me, it was like, you know what? That's life. She just sees this as being this huge wall of beautiful colors that make her happy.
And for the international viewers and listeners to the show, Bunnings is Australia's largest hardware chain with superstores and just these massive walls of paint colours. And everybody should go to Bunnings at some point in time and just wander around. And
For a sausage sandwich.
yes, yes, that's right. Every Saturday morning fundraising, the
Yeah.
sausage sizzles on the go. Um, Garry, I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time and more particularly your wisdom. And I think the challenge is really clear for people that are leading companies, whether you are the founder, and interestingly, if you are the founder, you are the original source of culture and values and purpose and leadership. If you're the CEO of a company and you are the steward of what the company was established to do, you are now the caretaker of the values and the purpose and the culture and the people inside the organization. My challenge is really simple as you listen to Garry unpacking this. Are you managing the things in your business, managing the tangibles day to day, or are you actively leading people and leading the intangible in your business day to day? And not losing sight of the year on year growth that a company can enjoy as well commercially when you happen to do that. So it's not just for altruistic, philanthropic, feel good reasons. It's because it's the right thing to do, but it's also because there's a real economic value in actually doing that. So, Garry, thank you so much for giving us this time, but more particularly your wisdom. I really, really appreciate it.
Simon, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for what you do to help get the message out there, because the world can be a better place, and business has a responsibility and an opportunity to make a positive difference in the world. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you very much.